In this short video on diffusion, we will revise the important concept of what is diffusion. Then we will consider an example from cell. We will talk about plant versus animal cell regarding diffusion, then how diffusion works, and some of the important factors which affect diffusion. Okay, so let's first start. Well, you see, cells, they need things like glucose, which is the sugar, and oxygen to survive. Without that, cells cannot live, right? They will die. Now, they also need to get rid of the waste products, just like us. Cells are very smaller part inside us, and in that way they are similar to us. Okay, so you see, they also need to get rid of waste products like, say for example, carbon dioxide. Now these materials, say both oxygen as well as carbon dioxide, they move in and out of the cells by a process known as diffusion. Okay, now basically diffusion is where a substance moves from an area of high concentration, that means where there are lots of that substance, to an area of low concentration, that is where there are less of it. Say for example, look into the figure over here. Okay, now these are the outside the cell. This is sort of cell membrane, you can say, the cell boundary. Okay, here cell membrane. Now there are lots of these lines, means they are moving. So outside the cell, so this is the outside zone, lots of glucose you can see, right? But inside the cell there are very less amount of glucose. So what happens is that through this process of diffusion, random motion, okay, this glucose molecules, they enter the cell from outside, okay, and through this cell membrane, and this is the process of diffusion. Okay, so basically diffusion is one of the main ways where cells absorb vital substances like oxygen and get rid of waste like carbon dioxide. Okay, so this goes inside and this comes outside. Okay, now very important to note that diffusion is a passive process. That means it does not require any energy. So before the diffusion, the stuff is like this. You can see lots of red dots outside. But after the diffusion, there are less red dots outside, whereas there are more inside. That means most of the glucose molecules have diffused in. Now in this figure, I am talking about mainly diffusing in. Similarly, we can have a situation for carbon dioxide. Say for example, before there are lots of carbon dioxide molecule inside, and afterwards there will be more outside and less carbon dioxide inside. So this is before and this is after, and this is regarding CO2. Say for example, here this picture, both of them, this is regarding oxygen. Okay, so the picture will be somewhat different in both of them. Next, you see, in an animal cell, oxygen and glucose diffuse through the membrane into the cell, and this is because there is more oxygen and glucose outside the cell than there is inside. Just like this picture, more oxygen and glucose outside than inside. Now this is for the case of animal cell. Okay, now carbon dioxide and waste products, they also diffuse out of the cell into the blood. Now in the case of plant cell, the carbon dioxide actually diffuses in, and oxygen and glucose, they diffuse out. So you see, the roles of oxygen and carbon dioxide are different in plant and animal cells. Now let us quickly talk about how diffusion works. Well, you can see over here, you have poured beaker of solution, put some color in it, then slowly you will see the particles. You see the nice color inside. This, why is this happening? Why is the structure like this? This is because of random motion of the particles of the ink particles, right? Now what happens is that there is a difference of concentration of particles, the ink particles and the solution. Say for example, this zone, there is hardly any ink particle, whereas in this particular zone there are lots of it. So slowly over time the particles will diffuse from here to elsewhere, like this. They will diffuse from this place, this zone to this zone. And although the particles move about randomly over time, they become evenly mixed, causing a net overall movement, and because of this you see a unified color. So now there is more or less a uniform concentration over the entire solution. So basically what I have been saying is that diffusion is an overall movement, a net overall movement from the area of high concentration like this to an area of lower concentration. Okay, fine. Now let us talk about some of the factors which affect diffusion. Now, as I have already told, since diffusion is a main way that cells absorb substances such as oxygen and get rid of waste such as carbon dioxide, it is very important that we understand what are the factors which speed up or speed down this diffusion process, or basically what are the factors which affect the rate of the diffusion. Now, the first factor is temperature. Well, you see, particles, they move faster when they are warmer. That means they have got more kinetic energy. Temperature is proportional to kinetic energy. More temperature means more random motion of the particles. So the rate of diffusion speeds up at higher temperatures, and as we cool down, the rate of diffusion also goes down. So here the rate is directly proportional to temperature, you can say, the rate of diffusion. Okay. Next, concentration gradient. That means the greater the difference in the concentration between the two places, the faster is the substance diffusion. That means if in a place there are, say, lots of particles and in the other place there are very few, here the diffusion will occur much faster compared to another case where there are roughly much less difference in concentration. Okay. So again, rate is proportional to the concentration gradient. Next, surface area. You see, the larger the surface area of the cell or an organ, the faster substances can diffuse in and out of it. Why? Because the surface area is large, so there is more place for diffusing in or diffuse out. So again, the rate is proportional to the surface area. And finally, the distance. You see, the shorter the distance of the particle have to diffuse, the faster is the rate of diffusion. Say we have to diffuse from here to here, case 1, or from here to here. Of course, in this case the diffusion will be faster. Why? Because the distance is much smaller compared to the distance over here. So in this case the rate is inversely proportional to distance. Okay, so these are the important factors.